5 men deported to African prison. They've been denied due process by the Trump administration. The attorney for 5 men who have been deported to Eswatini prison accused Trump's deportation program of denying them due process. Well, we've heard this before. We can tell you none of the men have a connection there. They don't know anyone there. They have no familiarity with the people, the food. Just decided, this would be a good vacation for you. The 5 men deported by the United States to Eswatini in July have been held in a maximum security prison in the African nation for several weeks, 7, in fact, charged. Nope. No charges, no explanation, no access either to legal counsel. Their lawyers, we should tell you, said Tuesday, this is the condition they're living in. They accused the Trump administration's third country deportation program of denying their clients due process. This is something very fundamental. You don't have to even be an American to get due process. Denied. So let's tell you more about these unfortunate 4 men. AP reporting that the New York-based Legal Aid Society said that it was representing one of the men, Jamaican national Orville Victoria, and that he had been inexplicably and illegally sent to Eswatini when his home country was willing to accept him back. So he could go back to Jamaica. I've been there plenty of times, where he's familiar, family, circumstance, support. But we said, no, you're going to one of those S-hole countries. Isn't that what Donald Trump says about Africa? The worst. So it's not like they were sending him on a vacation. Well, that contradicted the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, which said when it deported the 5 men with criminal records that they were being sent to Eswatini because their home countries refused to take them. Jamaica's foreign minister has also said that the Caribbean country did not refuse to take back deportees. Victoria was the first of at least 20 deportees sent by the U.S. to various African nations in the last 2 months to be identified publicly. Could be more. Who knows? We'll find out at some point, I guess. The deportations are part of the Trump administration's expanding third country program to send migrants to countries in Africa that they have no ties to get them off U.S. soil. Since July, the U.S. has deported migrants to South Sudan, Eswatini, Rwanda, while a 4th African nation, Uganda, says it has agreed to a deal in principle with the U.S. to accept deportees. Again, the AP with the reporting here. Deal means money, by the way, in case you didn't know. Okay. Deal means cash for cruelty. Now, Victoria served a 25-year prison sentence. He was granted parole in 2021, Legal Aid Society said, but was now being held in Eswatini's main maximum security prison for an undetermined period of time. That's despite completing the sentence. The sentence is over. U.S. Homeland Security Department said that he was convicted of murder. Not good. Agency posted on X in reference to a New York Times report on Astoria, saying that it will continue enforcing the law at full speed without apology and apparently without due process. Legal Aid Society said that Eswatini lawyers acting on behalf of all 5 men being held in prison there has been repeatedly denied access to them by prison officials since they arrived in the tiny southern African nation bordering South Africa. That was in mid-July. The other 4 men, citizens of Cuba, Laos, Vietnam, Yemen. A separate lawyer representing the 2 men from Laos and Vietnam said his clients also served their criminal sentences inside the U.S. and had been released into the community. Suddenly, without warning, no explanation from either the U.S. or Eswatini government, they were arbitrarily arrested and sent to a country to which they have never, ever been. Lawyer Tin Thang Nguyen said in a statement. They're now being punished indefinitely for a sentence they already served. If you're one who could care less about cruelty and have at it, maybe you care more about money. Why have them serve their sentences here if you could just send them somewhere else to serve the time? It's probably cheaper. I mean, if you're that kind of a person, I don't know. Said the U.S. government was orchestrating secretive third country transfers with no meaningful legal process resulting in indefinite detention. Department of Homeland Security responded. They're claiming the New York Times is peddling a sob story of a criminal, illegal alien murderer. U.S. Homeland Security said those two men had been convicted of charges including child rape, second-degree murder. Not good. I don't want any part of these people. But, there's a but, folks. Third lawyer, Alma David, said she represented the two men from Yemen and Cuba who are also being held in the same prison, denied access to lawyers. She said she had been told by the head of the Eswatini prison that only the U.S. ambassador could grant access to the men. If they're out of here, they're out of here. Why can't the new non-related country handle things, communication, lawyers, access? Either you're in it or you're out of it. Pick which one. Since when does the U.S. Embassy have jurisdiction over Eswatini's national prison? She said in a statement, adding the men weren't told a reason for their detention. No lawyer has been permitted to visit them. David said all five were being held at U.S. taxpayers' expense. How much more? Look, folks, we don't have any more money. Do you want our blood too? Yeah, probably. Authorities in South Sudan have given little information on where 8 men sent there in early July are being held or what their fate might be. They were also described by U.S. authorities as dangerous criminals from South Sudan, Cuba, Laos, Mexico, Myanmar, Vietnam. Look, the minute you talk about assaulting children, murder, well, I don't want you around me. And maybe even after you serve your sentence. Although, as an American citizen, I realize that once your punishment is over, I may not have a right to keep you away from me and my neighborhood. Some things, schools and the like, if you're a certain kind of predator. But this is just more of the same, is it not? Does it surprise you? Because it doesn't surprise me, Elliot, that these other countries are going for it. Participants, they may not even like us on most days, but you dangle a little cash. Sure, we'll take the worst of the worst, the most violent criminals. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a deal and they're falling in line. And I think it's, a little sad. I also think just in terms of the conversation, it's a really difficult one to have because, as you said, these aren't maybe the best people at times. They maybe are some of the worst. However, the conversation around due process is about exactly these kinds of situations. You still get some kind of due process, some kind of representation and that I think should be a point for like patriotism. People, we should be like, this is one of the best things about how we treat people in this country is that they are afforded due process and they are afforded representation so that they can at least make a case for themselves and they can be found guilty by a jury of their peers. This isn't that. And I think that that is a subtle point that gets completely washed away the moment you recognize like, oh yeah, these are charges. And the statement that the Homeland Security made sounds like it was written by like someone who works for the New York Post. Because the moment you go, hey, due process is a good thing, and they go, but they're a murderer, then it is very easy to just shift people's opinion on it and have them forget that actually due process is something that we don't want to take lightly. And it's something that you might actually need in the future, God forbid, and we want to afford it to people.
Well, I know an occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue who leaned on all due process and then some. It seemed to even be expanded for him.
Hmm.
Okay.
Who could that be?
Yeah, exactly. Good friends with this lawyer. He's a good guy. What am I going to say? He just loves difficult cases and doing what he does. He'd be who I'd call if I had all these felonies piling up and I had kept documents in my toilet. That said, you're right. And it's always the Trump administration who deems people this and that. And listen, these people we're talking about, these men may be the worst of the worst. But as you mentioned, it's not about that, homie. And I don't even want to take the bait. It's supposed to be across the board. This is what we're doing. But every time the Trump administration wants to color outside the lines and do more cruelty, that's really what they're doing here. They put the label first, worst of the worst, and then they say that means we can do whatever we want. Final words, thoughts?
Yeah, and there's like I think a joy that certain people get watching this
Yes.
kind of stuff unfold, and it's a very dark kind of thing. I think it speaks to some of our worst impulses, which is ironic because they're doing so from this kind of morally righteous, look at how bad these people are, and yet they're endorsing a kind of like system wide level of corruption and just unfairness. And so it's like, look, which one is it? If you want to play the moral high ground, then you should do so and embrace due process and not just chalk it all up to, oh, well, who cares? They're bad. It's like, yeah, they are bad. That's why you need due process. These things are connected. They're not opposites, I guess. At least
Yeah.
that's how I see it.
And you don't have to be mental. These are simple things, and these are the same
Yeah.
people who constantly pivot, as you're mentioning, who you cut in line at the Dairy Queen. Their granddaughter can't ride a ride at Six Flags, and they're not having it. But this,
Lose
somebody
it.
who they deem disposable, who cares?
Who cares?
Got work to do. Make my cone a double. Where are the sprinkles? They just want to keep on living. It's disgusting. It's another one we'll keep following.